Welcome to the channel. In this video, I'm going to be building the tool holders for my French Cleat wall. I'm going to build 3 cabinets. Eventually, they have doors. Right now, they're just shelves. I'm also going to be building a saw till and a plane till. Now, the most important part of this process, draw it out. For me, I need to worry about what it looks like because it's also going to be my YouTube background. You might be able to kind of skip that part. But this first page right here is the overview page. So I am drawing it out to see what it's going to look like, see how things are going to fit. The main thing here is make sure you grab the tools you want to store and how you want them to be arranged and take your measurements and then build the cabinets off of that. Don't say, well, I'm going to build a 12 by 24 cabinet and hope things fit. Put the tools on the table, take some measurements, and go from there. I do the same thing with my hand planes. I lay them out on the table, I take some measurements, and I figure out how I want it to be stored. Now, the second page of this, so the first page, again, I said was the overview to see what it's going to look like. I then flip the page and actually draw out each cabinet individually, exploded so you can see the different joints. The main reason I do that is to make sure that I account for the jointery on my cut list, because when I was starting out, that was one of the things that I messed up a lot. I would forget to account for, the 3/4 inch dovetail on the end of the board, so I would always end up being short and it'd mess things up. So I started doing this and I haven't really made a ton of errors since then. So I highly recommend drawing these out. The other thing, it helps you double check yourself. Are the measurements I'm planning going to work? Is it going to look right? Am I going to be able to store everything like I think I'm going to? You can also rearrange things. So for example, my plane till, I initially had drawn it really wide and short, but there was going to be a lot of wasted space when I drew it out on this page. So I grabbed my hand planes, I laid them back out on the table, I took some more measurements, and I was able to change it so the plane till could be more narrow and longer. So take your time on this step and don't rush it. Now from that second page, that's where we can get our cut list. I like moving this onto a smaller notebook that I can carry around the shop with me. The boards that I'm using for this project have a tongue and groove on them, so I needed to just chop those off real quick before I could cut them down to length. Over at the chop saw, I have a couple pointers for you guys. I know a lot of these stands have stops on them. However, if the boards are shorter or you only have a couple cuts, you might not want to take the time to set all that up. So what I do is I actually take my tape measure, and for example, if your cut needs to be at 12 inches, I draw a line at 12 inches, and I also draw a line at 12 1/8. So I know the saw needs to go exactly between those lines so you can line up the blades and have perfect cuts that way. The other thing you'll notice, I have these lines on my saw that are at 8, 10, and 12 inches, so I can easily bump the boards up against those lines and make a cut. Now, they're not perfectly spot on, so sometimes I might need to trim them up later, but for shop furniture like this, it's close enough. Now it's time to lay out your boards if you want to pay attention to any kind of grain direction or anything like that. Stack them together so you know which ones go where. And then a lot of people use pencil to mark out like the corners of the jointery. A goes with A, blah, blah, blah. I like to use a punch just because the pencil wipes off. Personal preference, I guess. And now it's dovetail time. Now, this is something that I've been looking forward to because when I first started woodworking, I did everything as box joints because I thought they were easier until I learned that dovetails were easier. So now I'm doing dovetails and learning how to do those. So I am by no means somebody to teach you how to do dovetails, but you can see my process. I use the edge rail to mark them out, and then I write those down on my Moxon vise because for this project, they are all going to be the same, and there is a lot to do. So I'm not going to bore you guys with that footage, but I will show you some highlight reels. Hold up! Before we go any further, I have to give a shout out to the sponsors of this video. They provided all of the lumber for the tool holders and the cleat wall. It is the Alexander brothers. There are 3 brothers that run a business together. There's a woodworker, a blacksmith, and a leather worker. You got to check out their lumber prices. They have some amazing lumber prices, and they do ship even if you're not local to Virginia. Make sure you check out Shay Alexander's Instagram page if you want your daily dose of woodworking. His brother Drew Alexander also has a YouTube channel with some amazing blacksmith videos. And then finally, his other brother does leatherworking. So if you need a custom chisel roll or anything like that, make sure you check out their website and hit them up. And again, Alexander Brothers, thank you so much for sponsoring this video. So right here you can see me using the Sean shim, and I just wanted to point out that I had to abandon that method because the saw that I'm using pretty much has no set. This Sean shim, what it does is it accounts for the set of your saw to make a tighter fitting joint, but because mine had no set, the joints weren't coming together at all. So you're going to see me fiddle with those for a while here, but just know that on future dovetails I didn't use the Sean shim in this project. So clearly I need a better fret saw, so let me know down below which fret saw you recommend, or maybe I just need better blades. Recommend those down below too. I will mention that those new concept ones, I'm not paying that much for a fret saw, so please don't recommend that brand. Pick a different one. Back to it. And this is where you can see that that Sean shim wasn't working for the saw that I have, because there was these joints weren't even close. I needed to trim the sides up so much. I fiddled with it a few times and finally just chiseled it out farther to make sure that it could fit. Again, that's why I abandoned the Sean shim idea. So what I like to do is a test fit to see if the dovetails are going to go together, and then once they do, I take them back apart and chisel out the rest of the waste on the pin board. That might be weird, but that's my process. So as you can see, these aren't perfect, but this was my first true set of dovetails for like a project. Other than that, it was all practice. I also want to point out that I had my marking gauge set wrong. I had it set too short, when what I should have done was set it over the edge of the board, so then I could trim these tails up versus them being short and looking like this. But it's a shop project, so I'm not worried about it, and I'm not going to try to fight it. Now I got to do this process about a million more times. Ready? Boom. 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 Done. And we are ready for glue up. Kinda. You'll see in a little bit why I say kinda. But anyways, this is some umbrella material that I got off of Amazon. It was cheap and the glue scrapes right off, so I like using that to cover my bench. You can see here I have all of this different sawdust saved for that sawdust and glue trick to fill gaps. I've never gotten that to work right for me, and I don't know why I keep saving the sawdust or why I tried it again, but I tried it on the first joint, got annoyed with it, and abandoned that idea. But alright, here we go with the glue up. Alright, so here I am a little while later, and I just realized that I didn't cut any of the grooves for the shelves. They're going to hold things. So like for this one, it's for the saws, and I was supposed to put a holder up here and a holder here for the saws to go in there. This next one here is for hand planes. It's supposed to have a whole bunch of them to put the hand planes in, but I was really excited to glue these up. Didn't even think about it. The goal was to do that on the table saw and just make them all, the same. Run it over the table saw with the dado stack in there so it was faster, but I can do them with hand tools now, so I'm not too worried about it. What I might do is actually make them stopped grooves so they don't go all the way to the front. So maybe it worked out for the better. I don't know. I'll be back when the glue dries. It's too tacky to take them apart now. And now it's time to figure out how I want everything arranged. As I had mentioned before, I changed the idea for the sawtill, so I messed around with a couple different designs until I finally settled on one and figured out where I needed that groove to be. I did the same exact thing with my hand planes. I laid them out with the different spacers to see where they were going to go and what that was going to look like, and then I finally decided where each one of those grooves needed to be and marked everything out. Alright, so I'm going to walk you guys through the process that I use to cut these grooves. Luckily, I have enough space in this panel to be able to use the chisel. If it was lower, I'd have to go with a different method, but you're supposed to cut these before you assemble it, so just keep that in mind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my widest chisel to deepen these lines, and then I'm going to create a little indent, a little groove in them, so this saw can ride along that shoulder, because you want to make sure that these lines are crisp. Oh, if you're really good with hand saws, you don't need to do this part. After that, I'm going to take a smaller chisel and clear out most of the waste, and then I'm going to grab my router plane and use that to fully clean out the rest of the waste. Alright, so now it is time to actually get the shelf cut for the sawtill. Basically just take the measurement of how long you need it to be. I cut it out with a handsaw, and then from here, this may be a little bit abnormal. So what I do is I figure out where I want the saws to be, where their blades are going to hit, and where their brass backs are going to hit. I then cut out the grooves for where the saw blade is going to be. I basically put the saws in there to make sure they're okay, and I mark out where those brass backs go, and then I go back with the saw and cut out little recesses for those brass backs. So here's what it looks like. Even though I did rearrange the placement of the saws, I didn't like that big saw being right in the middle, so I moved it to the side. And then we were ready for glue up, and as you can see, I wanted to add a support piece because I didn't think about how weak it would get in the middle there, so I added a piece to the top and the bottom just to give that bridge a little bit more support. Then it was on to the plane tail, which was much easier because it was just normal straight shelves. I did cheat and use the miter saw just because it was a lot of repeated cuts and I didn't want to do those by hand. And then it was time for a dry fit, and everything worked out really well, so I dove into the glue up, which went pretty smooth. I expected a little bit more issues. The only one that gave me issues was the middle shelf. I think the joint was just a little bit too tight, but it worked. I clamped it all down, and then I figured while the glue is drying, I should cut the strips for the cleats that are going to go on the backs of these tool holders. So I had a couple pieces of plywood that I cut into, it was either 5 inches or 5.5 inches wide, I don't remember now. And then I cut those into 45-degree angles. I do have to point out that I am not good at determining how to cut a board in half with a 45-degree angle to make sure it's perfect on both sides. So you can see I make a mistake here, and then I try again and still make a mistake. But it all worked out for the better because there were some of those holders that I could use thicker cleats on and other ones that I needed thinner cleats. So I'm not going to stress on it. I'm having fun here. So here I am figuring which strips go onto which holders, and it worked out really well because the plywood I used was the perfect length for the cabinets. The only ones I needed to cut were for the plane till and the saw till, and I'm putting 2 on each one of those. And then it was back over to the table saw where I had learned that I put the marks on the wrong sides of the board, so that would have meant the 45-degree angle would have been going against my miter gauge, and I did not feel comfortable doing that, so I just took my square and made the line a little bit longer so I could reference that to the blade to make sure that I was cutting in the right spot. And then for these longer pieces here, I learned that I need to actually put my line on the other side of the board to make the cut safe. There wasn't going to be a lot for me to hold on to that was going against the fence, and then if I had it the other way, again, the 45-degree angle would have been against the miter gauge. So, you know, it's always trial and error here when you're a woodworker. And then always make sure, I might be a little bit OCD about this, but I always wax my table saw and put a cover on it before I'm done with it for the day. So this part was a little tedious. What I had to do was put 2 screws into these cleats, hang them up on the wall to make sure that they work, come back and add more screws. I did that for the cabinets. The one cabinet didn't have as thick as a piece, so I had to figure out where that one needed to hang in relation to the other ones. And then when I screwed that one in, it was way off. It was like super diagonal, so I had to fix that. And then when it came to the sawtill, it was hanging up the cabinet, then figuring out where the sawtill cleat could go, putting 2 screws into that cleat, putting it back onto the wall to find out where the second cleat would go, coming back and attaching that cleat, putting more screws into all of them, and then doing the same thing for the plane till. So just accept that this part's going to take you a little bit of time. Also, if anybody is wondering why I have 3 drills, here's why. it's just faster. And now it's time for the finishing process. I'm just using some BLO in a ketchup bottle. Why do I have it in a ketchup bottle? Well, because you can spray it in the corners when you need to, and I've just found that that is super handy. Make sure you do 3 coats of BLO and dispose of your rag safely. Shh, I only did 1 coat. I don't know about you guys, but this was the part of the video that I've been waiting for the entire time. Let's fill the wall! Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure you stick around to the end so you can see the worst mistake I made on this entire project. Just a warning, it does include blood, so if you don't like blood, click away before the end of this video. Anyways, I'm going to be making some tool holders that go in the middle of this wall. There will be separate videos coming out about that. There'll be some that hold chisels and mallets and marking knives, and you know, those kinds of things. These 3 cabinets on the top of the wall, I am going to put doors on them because I want to put up my lumber sponsors logo. The guy that provides me with the tool wax, the plain wax, his name is Matt Cottrell with Cottrell Toolworks. I want his logo up there, and then I also started a nonprofit called Plain Wellness. I'll have a separate video coming out about that with some more information. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions, any comments, anything like that, feel free to let us know down below. And here we go with the bonus content.
Boop, 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 boop.